Is in the YouTube share, Anisha?
Yeah. Yes, promise. Great. Over to you, Sylvia.
Hello everyone. Welcome to this EconTEAching chat. Maybe we are going to wait just a couple of minutes, so maybe more people and colleagues can join us. So, well, I should wait, but the meeting is going to be recorded. So, just for you to know. And well, I think we can start. The conversation is going to be very informal, and the topic of the part today is improving inclusivity with the student partners. And we have the great pleasure to host Laura Harvey from the University of East Anglia. Laura is a lecturer in economics and widening participation academic officer. Then from the other side of the ocean, we have Amy Eremion-Kale, who is an assistant professor of economics at Georgia State University. As a matter of fact, I am also working with widening participation projects, and my name is Dr. Silvia Dal Bianco. I'm a CTaLE member. Hi, Steffi, and I'm a lecturer in economics, teaching at UCL Economics Department. So the way in which we thought about this chat follows a little bit the journey of our students. So that Laura is going to start because she's an expert in a lot of things, but she decided to talk about before the students get into uni and into possibly economics, I guess. Then Amy is going to talk about widening participation issues when students are studying economics, and I was going to let you know something about when students take the lead or the co-lead to widen participation within our degrees. So that I think we are ready to start. I wish to remind again that the meeting is recorded and also live streamed on YouTube. So, well, without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to Laura. Welcome, first of all.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. I do have some slides just to kind of anchor my thinking. Can everyone see those okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so as Sylvia mentioned, I work quite a lot on access into university and supporting widening participation students with transition to higher education from those from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I've kind of overviews that I have some brief lessons from outreach and doing outreach and working with widening participation on widening participation activities with current students. And I'm going to, I thought the best way to structure this would be around a kind of case study of an activity that we're doing at UEA. So I want to talk about Preparing For, which is kind of the umbrella name for a big multi-intervention outreach project that we're doing at the University of East Anglia. And I'm leading, so it's across the university, and I'm leading on the social sciences branch. So we have preparing for medicine, preparing for pharmacy, but I'm leaning on the kind of preparing for social sciences, which at UEA we define as kind of business, economics, law, social work, education, psychology. So these are students that are kind of interested in kind of, human behavior, society, these kind of things. So that these are the students that they get funneled into this arm of the project. And the project starts at the end of year 12, or level 3, year 1 in the UK system. So they're about to make their decision about whether or not they're going to apply to university, and also what university to apply for and what course they want to apply for. And we follow them throughout this journey of applying, going to open days, doing the UCAS application, once they get their offers back from universities, going through the firm and accept, and then we work on that transition into first year of university. So we follow them kind of right through until the Christmas of that year 1 at university, if they decide to go to university. If they decide not to, we support them with the transition to wherever it is that they would like to go. And the aim of the project is kind of 2 main aims. The main thing is informed choice, that students are making the decision which is right for them, and they have the information that they need to be able to make a decision. And the second aim is to help with that transition to university, through it. So helping them know what skills do they need to develop, what other support is there, making sure that they're aware of the support available to them at university. So ensuring that, they declare any disabilities or any additional needs that they have. So it's kind of, these are the 2 main goals that we have, and they kind of select into the kind of faculty branch. So throughout this kind of 18 months that they work with us, there's lots of different elements of the program. And our current students, so our current undergraduate students, support us at each part of the program. So throughout all of this period, there's online mentoring. So each of the prospective students, the applicants, they are paired with one of our current undergraduate students. They get to pick the who they would like to be their mentor. So we have our current students create a profile, and they talk a little bit about themselves. And interestingly, the matches aren't always on subject, but the matches might be the fact that they're a commuter student, so they want to talk to another commuter student, or they're a mature student, so they want to match to another mature student. So there's all these other characteristics, not just subject, which we've noticed that prospective students like to match on. And what we do is we provide our mentors with a guide of what we think should be kind of discussed at each month of the project and through that application journey. This guide has been refined quite a lot over the years, and that's been a result of having input from our current students about where perhaps different conversations would work better, queries that they've received which have been kind of quite common, and the sorts of conversations that they've been having. So that's kind of the first big element of the project. The second is the subject tasters. So it's about informed choice, making sure students select into the right degree for them. So having encouraging participation in subject tasters, which they might not necessarily have done before. Economics is a subject which isn't offered in a lot of sixth forms or colleges, particularly in Norfolk. So they might not have been exposed to economics previously before participating in the subject. So if they think they want to study business, we might say to them, well, why don't you try an economics taster, or why don't you try a law taster as well, just to be sure that that's what you want to do. Or if you say, I'm interested in psychology, we say, why don't you try an economics taster and also try an education taster? So a lot of students kind of switch between psychology and education. So it's all about helping with that informed choice part of the project. And then the kind of the next 2 are kind of together, the study skills and application support. So these are webinars where myself and other academics would take the lead, kind of supporting with what study skills which might be useful for them once they go to university. So these include maths confidence, navigating the library, referencing, study skills, how to put a study timetable together. So all of these other practical skills, which is useful for a range of different subjects. And we try and encourage the psychology students to go to the maths confidence sessions. The economics students go to the maths confidence sessions, and to try and build that community amongst the participants in the project. Throughout all of this, we have current students working with us on the project, not just through the mentoring, but participating in the skills sessions, the taster sessions, and offering their insights and their perspective on what they're being shown and what we're discussing with them about the different subjects, about their experiences at university. This isn't about recruiting students to UEA, although we're hosting it. So some of the questions are UEA specific, and other times they are much more general. But there's one thing: working with the students has been really valuable for developing this project. So it's been running for about 3 years now, and each iteration we've made changes because of the input that we've had from our students. They're much closer in age to the young people that we're working with, so they can understand a bit more the constraints or the kind of environment or the context in which they're working in, particularly with COVID. Our current students had their education disrupted by COVID, and the students that we're working with were very much impacted by COVID. So there's that kind of relationship and rapport that can be built there that we can't necessarily understand. So the insights from the students is really valuable in that regard, from understanding how our students are doing it, and considering problems that we might not have thought of before. Now we're finding that actually the prospect of being in a seminar or a lecture is much more daunting than we've had feedback in the past, because they're not so used to this interaction. So we need to do something to kind of overcome these new considerations, which we've never thought before. Our students that we work with are involved in the day-to-day of the project. They're constantly talking with the participants on the online mentoring, whereas we're not. We see them, you know, every month or so. We get to know them, but we don't get to know them as well as the current students. So they're able to feedback more formally about different things that are happening and what's going on with our students. Also, it's really great experience for the current student workers that we have participating in the project. More often than not, students want to work on these kind of projects because they've benefited from them in the past, or they identify as being from a widening participation background themselves. So offering these kind of opportunities is a great way for them to kind of develop their leadership skills, their mentoring skills, and other employability skills through a paid opportunity, which kind of brings me on to my considerations, which is if we are asking anything of our students which is beyond what we would traditionally expect, students should be paid for their time. So it can be quite a costly activity if we had 15 mentors working at least 2 hours every week. It adds up quite quickly. But I think it's very important that if we're working with students, that they should be paid for their time, and it should be considered a job. Which kind of brings me on to my last kind of thoughts from doing this longitudinal project with our current students, that the dynamic with the student changes. So they're not necessarily, I'm the lecturer and they're my undergraduate students. We treat them more as colleagues. And actually, when you interact with the students more as colleagues versus that student-lecturer relationship, you build a different kind of rapport and a different kind of relationship, which isn't necessarily the same as you would get from staff-student liaison committees or formal staff-student feedback. And actually, the informal discussions that we've had with our mentors about how their studies are going, how their degrees are going, what's their experience been like, has actually been really insightful for us to be like, oh, we hadn't realized that, particularly now with, student engagement is a challenge and it's a bit of a puzzle as to what's going on. But talking to the students, like, what's going on, like, it's a different dynamic to what it would be in a staff student liaison committee, where you would be like, why aren't students attending? And you're confronted with, the head of school, teaching director, and it can be a much more intimidating environment. So changing this dynamic so that the students are seen as colleagues not just the students, I think is really valuable as a lecturer. And in fact, feedback from doing the skill sessions for the applicants has actually been fed back, and we're developing those into the broader transition activities of the university and of the school for widening participation students. So actually it's going to be rolled out to kind of to be a more structured part of the welcome in for our undergraduate students. So that's been quite beneficial, and we wouldn't know whether or not that would be a good idea had we not spoken to our students, spoken to the participants, and seen whether or not this was actually valuable for them in terms of helping them with transitioning to university and higher education. So I kind of, that's all I wanted to kind of say, that, you know, working with current students on a project, which can be around, you know, outreach, or it could be anything, that changes the relationship with the students, and that I think is really valuable in terms of developing your projects and having different insight, but also in terms of gauging, you know, what's going on with the student body beyond what you might get from formal communication structures that might exist in the university. So that's kind of all I wanted to say for now, but I'm happy to take questions and discuss other people's experiences and anything like that.
So thanks a lot, Laura. This was very interesting. And we have some questions. Are you happy to take them now? And then, okay. So there are, well, different types. I drop them sort by category. Well, for what concerns the students who are going to be helped through the project. Well, Claudia is asking whether you ever considered to include or to take them since year 10, because by they go to year 12, we might be slightly late in terms of the decision they have made already. Then another question again from Claudia is that no, I have a question on this side as well. So how do you select the schools you work with? Because we found some difficulties in liaising and, well, somehow having establishing an exchange with these schools. And then we have questions about the importance of being educated in the UK system for being a mentor. And I have questions around the incentives you provide to mentors, if they're happy or not.
Yeah, okay. So we decide, so there's kind of working with year 12, there's kind of a practical reason and I guess a non-practical reason. So the practical reason is if students are over the age of 16, they can sign up themselves for activities. So if we were to start with year 10, we need to get parent consent and other considerations, and schools that these are students going into GCSEs, it can be quite tricky. Priorities of teachers can be a bit challenging. So year 12 was kind of, we wanted to pick up students which were more or less set on the university track, because obviously we're a university, so we can provide the most help with that. And they would be able to sign up individually. Typically, at least at UEA, if we're dealing with those under the age of 16, we do class sign up interventions, and 16 over, we do either class or individual sign up. So students to this project, they were able to sign up themselves. It was open, it was advertised kind of all over Norfolk, which is the region, Norfolk and North Suffolk, which is the region that our outreach works with, and students were selected if they met any one of our WP criteria. So they went to one of our outreach target schools. They were from a Polar 1 background. They declared a disability. They were in care or estranged, and there was another, or they were from an ethnic minority background. I think there's a few more, but if they met our widening participation criteria, they were eligible to participate. So we promoted it through our outreach school contacts, social media. We had quite a funky Facebook ad to recruit students. We did get some applicants from students that weren't eligible. And in that case, we decided that because it was relatively low cost to have an additional student, that they would be invited to webinars and things, because that we weren't paying for their transport or anything like this. So given that was so we did have interest from students that weren't strictly eligible, but those that were eligible had kind of the full package. Let's say. What was the other question? Yeah, mentors could absolutely not be from the UK system, and we did have a couple who went from the UK system, and it wasn't a problem. I think actually it was really beneficial because the discussions were really fruitful about different perspectives, different experiences on university, and understanding kind of different journeys into university. So I think it's not necessary at all, and actually it's really valuable to have those different voices. And then the last question was about the incentives for the mentors. Yeah, so they were paid for 2 hours work. Let me get this right. I think it was 2 hours work minimum monthly as the starting point, and then we could track how much. So we could see their conversations, but we didn't tend to look, but we got an overview of how many messages were sent. So students where it seemed like they were working more, we would pay them more. But that was kind of the baseline. And then we adjusted depending on, some months are more chatty than others, but on average, that was how it worked, because it's kind of hard to judge how much time someone puts into sending a message. So that was kind of the baseline that we worked with. And for the mentors, we also worked with Careers Central, so our career service, to offer them kind of a workshop. And we have something called the UEA Award, which I think other universities have, and it was how they could use this experience to fulfill some of the criteria for this award, and how they could talk about it in interviews and things. So we were really keen to make sure that the mentors got a lot out of the project beyond just the money, that actually they were seeing the employability skills that they were developing, and that they were able to express that properly when it came to that. So that was something that was really important to us.
And also there was an interesting question that maybe we can pass to Amy, but how were they trained, or were they trained at all?
Yes, so we did do training with them. So firstly, they had to go for our safeguarding training. They were all DBS checked as well. And then we just did some training about the types of questions that you might get asked, how you might answer. Like, most of the training was around knowing where that boundary is in a mentoring relationship. Like, when is it, that's okay, but when is that not okay? And kind of knowing where that boundary is. So the training was very much informal, but was very clear on what their responsibilities were from a safeguarding perspective. All the mentoring took place on Brightside, if you know the platform. So they did a lot of the safeguarding stuff, and they have filters on the stop words, but sometimes messages get through. So it was really important that the students knew from that perspective, because we kind of just did let them chat. We weren't getting involved in those conversations. Yes. We kind of just let them do it. So a lot of it was about knowing where that line is, in terms of what is a good mentoring relationship and what is not.
Thank you. This is this is something I would be interesting to know better, actually. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Laura. Now, Amy, if you're ready, you can introduce us your project.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Quick check. Wonderful, but that's the wrong slide. I guess you get a full preview. Just look away if you have. Okay. All right. Hi everyone. Good afternoon / morning, wherever you are. My name is Dr. Amy Erimionkale. I am a clinical assistant professor at Georgia State University here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm going to talk to you about an open education resources course, OER course, that my colleagues and I created in response to the need and requests of our students. Okay, please feel free to jump in if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer. All right, before I go deep into what our project looked like and the process, I think it's important for us to know the team. So we have Maya, she's our instructional designer. What Maya did for us was one of the key things in our project, in that she helped us streamline our process in developing this course, where putting the student first was our ultimate goal, and using a backward course design was, second to that. Where Maya's catchphrase was, don't overwhelm the students. We want them to learn what we want them to learn. So we need to be clear about those learning goals, because students had been saying they were getting overwhelmed by the material. They were getting overwhelmed by doing the work that we have for them, which is valid. So what we needed to do was create a course that was approachable for the students while being good. So the subject matter experts were Shelby Frost, who's also a professor here at Georgia State University, and myself. And our coding expert is Todd. He helped us code the interactive tools, which I'm going to talk about and show you a little snippets of. These tools were exceptionally important for helping the students feel active when they're learning the material. It's also great for faculty because it reduced some cheating by, when they can copy paste. That was not an option with our tools. Okay, so that's the team. I think the reason we succeeded at creating what we did was because we worked well together and each person contributed successfully to the project. So our main goals were fivefold. We wanted to create something that engaged the students, that increased their participation, especially in an online space. We're coming past in a world post-COVID, and we needed to, again, in response to the students' requests, we needed to create something that they felt engaged in when learning the course material. We also wanted the students to succeed in the course, of course. Cost. This was a big one as well. Georgia State University serves a very diverse population, socioeconomic wise and racially wise. And a good portion of our students felt it when they had to come into the class and pay for the extra materials they needed to complete the assignments, the textbooks. There is long history on the increasing costs and the barriers that this can create to student success when they have to worry about learning the material and paying for the extra material, the textbook and the assessments, access to those as well. So this was something we did for our students, where we provided these tools to them and the materials to them at zero cost to the students, zero monetary cost to the students. We also needed to make sure that this was fun, as fun as it could be, as in there's active learning. The students could see the material in different formats. So we have graphs, we have tables, fill in the blanks, all sorts. My favorite part is the facilitation of it. Georgia State University is a large university. Our classes have, especially the principles of microeconomics class, has about 120 students per section. And we're creating something that is going to assess the students quite intensely and in frequency, but we needed to make sure it wasn't overwhelming the faculty as well. So we created stuff that would automatically grade the work for the students, which is great for faculty, but it's also great for the students because they got to see their feedback right away, right? So we're providing them feedback on their performance right away, and it would be show up on their grade book as well right away. As we know, students like to track their progress and they'd like to know where they stand in the course. And this was something that definitely met that need. Okay, so a little bit about that backward course creation process. We started with figuring out do you guys see the arrow before I go? Okay, awesome. We started with figuring out what the learning objectives were. We needed to be clear in our minds what the students need to learn from our course. Doing this, my instructional designer said, helps us not stray from the path, right? We're PhD holders. We want them to know so much stuff. We know so much stuff. And we're like, we want them to learn. We want them to learn. Get all the information. That's great, but it's really not for the students because then they get overwhelmed by it, right? This is an introductory level course. So we needed to streamline and be very focused about what exactly they need to learn as a foundation in their economic education career. So that was our first step. Once we did, our next 2 blocks here were to figure out the way we assess their understanding of these learning objectives. So we started with the interactive tools. I will talk more about those. And assessments that we created, multiple choice pools of questions that were run on our learning management system, LMS, Brightspace. Now, these assessments that we created on the LMS were great. They're pretty deep in the pools. But we know after a few years, these questions will need to be recreated because students share that information with one another. At some point, there will be a place that has all those questions and all those answers stored for the students to access. So that's something that we keep updating over time. Now, with the interactive tools, on the other hand, these are randomly generated. The numbers the students see, the slope of the graphs the students see, the names they see are randomly generated and different every time. So it's okay. I used to say impossible, and then someone said nothing is impossible. Students are motivated. So it's nearly impossible for them to create a test bank of these questions. They would have to teach each other what to do, which is what we want, right? We want them to learn it and not to be able to teach each other gold. Okay, once we had those assessments, we needed to create a way to help the students actually learn the materials, right? So we knew what we wanted them to know. We knew how we were going to test them to see if they know what we want them to know. The last step was to figure out the materials they needed to be able to learn this. I will show you a little bit of what our LMS looks like. So on the right here, these are the different materials that Shelby and I, the subject matter experts, curated across the entire internet. Yeah, we went far. Of all the open materials that were available to be able to help our students get the understanding that they need. This was a long process because it's tempting to give them everything and just say, even if there's extra stuff, like extra stuff is great, but again, the instructional designer said it was very important, and we agreed that we don't overwhelm them with too much information because the students then feel like they cannot achieve what they are set out to do. And we want them to feel successful and be successful. So we went through different web pages, different videos, picking sections that they should focus on. For video sections, for web pages that they should focus on. And we continue to do this every semester. It was quite time consuming, but really worth it. So the way we establish the scores is for the students to start with these materials, right? Start with the learning materials in addition to your professor's teachings and lectures. Do the practice version of the quizzes, which you will see, interactive tools, and then do the actual assessments. But we leave it up to the students. One of the things we're going to be researching in the coming months is to see the success of students based on their paths, right? So if students start by actually doing what we tell them to do, look at the learning materials and then practice and then test. Do they do better than if they just jump right into the assessments where they have only one attempt? Or do they do okay if they practice the stuff, formative assessments, and then jump into the summative assessments. We don't know the answer to that yet. We have our suspicions, but we will have full information with that at a later point. Okay, good so far? Any questions so far? Nope. Okay.
Yes, so we have a few questions. Well, the first one is from Claudia, and she's asking whether there were problems in terms of student participation, in the sense that possibly they already most engaged use the resources, while the less engaged were still shy, so to speak.
That's a great question.
Do you have any idea about the reception of the project from students?
So that's a very great question. So we do have, later in the slides, I do have survey responses from students on how they interacted with the course, how they interacted with the interactive tools. But I will say that for the students who failed the course, had Fs in the course, it was the same in our course versus those in OER, non-OER courses. However, for the students in the middle, we saw more of a shift towards the higher grades, because then they needed to, after a while of experiencing the course the way it's set up, they realized they needed to practice first, actually understand what's going on so they can succeed in the assessment section. And because they learned that early on in the course, they ended up doing well overall in the entire course or module, as you would call it.
And I have a question.
Go ahead.
Did you work with some student partners to deliver the project, or was the engagement of the students in the fact that they voiced, you heard their voice asking for more resources for preparation?
It was absolutely the latter, where we were responding to the needs of our students, where they felt a cognitive overload in the material, but also a financial overload in paying for the material. So we invested our time and effort to create this course that would be good for them, to not only, not have to pay, which is great, but also learn the material well. Yeah. We have a GRA, he's a graduate student, so it's not an undergrad, but we had him with the comment on the feedback. So, sometimes when you really understand something, it's super clear to you and you're like, okay, where is that? Where is the error? Where is the issue? And you say it in one way and you think it's clear, but to those who don't know it, it's not. We had him, it's the truth. We were aware of this possible issue. And so we had him go through some of the responses and see if it made sense to him. He's a graduate student, so obviously his level is definitely different from undergrad, but it's better than, decades of experience teaching as a PhD.
Thanks, Amy.
Of course, thanks for asking. All right, so a little bit about the interactive tools. They have significant randomization. We have the practice versus the quiz version. Now, when we say practice versus the quiz version, the students are seeing the same type of structure of questions, but they have feedback if they get a question wrong, and they have unlimited attempts to do this. So these are the formative assessments that they're experiencing. Well, with the quiz version, on the other hand, they have one attempt, again, different set of questions because of randomization, and which lowers, we would expect, their ability to cheat unless they hire someone to just stay and do the work next to them or for them. But we don't expect that to be a huge percentage of our students. And we scaffolded complexity into the questions and their understanding of the material. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit of what we did, the different interactive tools, excuse me. But if you scan this with your phone or type that into your web browser, you will be able to see this website as well. You're looking for the Explore These Tools or Explore Tools section of that website. I know. We're dealing with Gen Zers, so we should be able to scan, right? We need to keep up. Okay, So I'm going to just continue here. Don't worry if you didn't get it, I'm going to have examples. So we have 4 main types of our interactive tools. We have tables with fillable cells. We have the open-ended and multi-select questions based on tables and graphs. So these are the ones that are very heavily scaffolded. We have the point and click problems where they select a table, rows in a table. And we have graphs where the students can drag the curve, they can pick points on the curve. I'm going to show you examples of 1, 2, and 4, I believe. So let's do that. So tables of fillable cells here, I've included 2 different versions of that so that we can see the way we randomize this. So not only are the students looking at different numbers, right? It's still just quantity, total cost, marginal cost. They're learning how to figure out the marginal cost from total cost and how to go back to figure out total cost from marginal cost. But they're also looking at different blank cells in the different tables. So each iteration has different blank cells. It has different numbers. So Sylvia cannot take a picture, a screenshot of her complete work and send it to Clodagh because Clodagh is going to have something different. Sylvia would have to be able to teach Clodagh what to do so that Clodagh knows what to do on hers. Right? This was something key that we wanted for our students. For questions based on tables and graphs, I created a nice GIF. Yeah, that works. Yay. So this here, we have a table where the students, as they move through the table, which is what that GIF is doing, there are lines that show them the points related to those points on the graph, teaching them and building their ability to read a graph correctly and then to interpret information from that graph, right? Hitting different learning skills while learning econ content. So the questions they need to fill out are on the left. I got everything right here because, you know, I need to show you that I know stuff before we keep going. But I'm okay, I'm sure we're good. So what happens is they see these questions, they look at the graph, and they know, right, coming in because they've done the learning materials where equilibrium exists, and they can work their way from there. Okay, I'll move on. Next, we have identifying important information from a table. So they can get information from a graph, wonderful. We also want them to be able to do this from a table, right? These are important life and employable skills that we're teaching our students in the classroom. All of this is zero cost, monetary cost to them. Also on this table, they see different numbers, they see different types of issues or questions. So for instance, on the left, when we're looking for optimality, right, we know marginal revenue or benefit should be equal to marginal cost. On the left, here 80 is equal to 80. It's wonderful, easy to spot that. They can fill in the information here. I answered that question incorrectly on purpose, right? It should be 4 or 5, right? But if they answer it incorrectly, they get feedback on what happened. So they can then retry. And when they reload this, they're going to see a different set of numbers. On the right here, we have a scenario where it's not 15 is equal to 15. They need to understand that they need to go as low as possible without crossing marginal cost being greater than marginal benefit, right? To pick their optimal point. So we're trying to show them this different levels of economic theory. So you notice that this is page 1 of 4 and this is page 4 of 4, while again reinforcing these skills they need to know, such as reading information from a table. Okay. So the last one here is dragging and dropping visual elements from a graph. So they see a supply curve or a demand curve has different slopes. We also wanted to make sure they were not focused on just the perfect 45-degree angles. So they see different slopes when they experience these graphs. And then here we're looking at movement along versus a shift, right? So at this point, if they've done the learning materials, they know the only thing that can cause a movement along that curve is the price of the good of that market, right? And then everything else causes a shift. So they have a prompt and they need to read that and figure out if there's going to be a movement along, up or down, or a shift of this curve. This is a nice one. They practice. If they get it wrong, they get hints similar to what I just said to you, and they try again, and they try again until they get it. With this one, because it goes by quickly, we had about 10. We have 10 different scenarios for them to practice. All of these are practice. In the quiz versions, they don't have 10 questions to answer. They have just one, right? But they've practiced 10 different scenarios. Okay. The results are sent automatically to the gradebook. This is what it looks like for them. It's great for us because we don't have to grade each student's work, which can become cumbersome. And it's great for the students because then they see their progress right away and they see where they stand in the course right away. And that immediate feedback is great for keeping the momentum for our students. Okay, so a little bit about their outcome and experience.
Amy, can I ask you to maybe, well, condense
Yes.
your last, maybe, well, in a
I
couple
will
of
I will
minutes
jump
so
right
that
to the end.
we can
Yes.
open the floor to discussion.
Absolutely. I'll jump right to the end. This hits on the question that Claudia asked about their experience in the class. We saw that in our course, the students did statistically significantly better in their grades. In terms of distribution, we just had more A's and B's and less C, D's, and F's than the non-OER courses, same type of content. The students felt that the quality of the course was great, which is what we want. So we have those high percentages if they agree with the statements here on the left, all positive statements. Interactive tools, they had no issues or problems using them. That's a big deal, but because if you've ever worked with tech on their students, you know that they have a short patience for issues going wrong. So the fact that we had almost 90% saying that there was no problem or issue was a huge deal. All right, that's all I have. Thank you for listening. And yeah, excited to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Well, we have one in the chat that is related to the way in which this project widens participation of students. That is possibly the economic angle of the story. So Steffi was asking, what student normally pay for a course in your university? Because, possibly it looks a lot.
That's a great question. That's a great question, Steffi. So right now it's $75 to access the course and assessment. So this is not to pay for the module, right? This is the extra stuff that they need to do assignments that determines their grades. So we calculated that we saved the students almost 100,000 in total from running this over 4 semesters only. And this is not all the students, by the way. We taught about 1,300 students out of almost 4,500.
But is this for the economics department at the
Correct.
site?
So yes. So
or
our
do
principles
you
of
borrow the course to someone else?
exactly. So our
basic
principles of
economics?
microeconomics course is a required course for the entire business school, and for also the econ department. Yeah, we're in the public policy school, by the way.
Ah, okay. And there is a question from Parama who is asking whether you can tell us a little bit more about your student body and how you got the initial feedback that highlighted the need for this. And the Claudia is asking, well, similar, not similar, but possibly related, if you assess the value of the course for different students in terms of their background.
Absolutely. So in the presentation we're going to do at CTaLE in a few days, we did do ordered probit to see if the students are doing better in our course by gender, by also Pell Grant. Pell Grant is a federal grant that gives the students basically a scholarship based on the financial need of their family. So based on their Pell Grant status, based on if they're first generation college students, as in nobody else in their family has gone to college. As you can imagine, for those students, going through the process of the unspoken rules of attaining a college degree is can be quite daunting. And we wanted to see what that would, if it makes any difference for our students. We did see effects, yes. I just didn't present them here because we're doing that at CTaLE. CTaLE, AEA, educate. Hopefully all these words mean things. If they don't, that's okay, just Google. In terms of where we got the initial feedback, That's a very great question, Parama. We got it from the dean's office. So students respond on their student evaluation of the instructor, and they say things like this all the time. But the dean's office was actually getting like direct hits or direct conversations from students saying that they were struggling, like sending in requests for funding to be able to take the courses and pay for course materials. So the first thing they did was create the fund that students could access if they really needed it. But the second, thanks for including that link. The second direction was to create something that was sustainable, right? Which is what this course is for students, where they can access it without needing to ask for the fund, or for access to the fund. In terms of our population, we're very diverse racially, we're very diverse socioeconomically. So we have a huge population who have Pell Grant access. In other words, their families qualified, their financial level qualified for a Pell Grant. Everyone is frozen.
You're not.
You can see
Okay.
it.
Okay, everyone was frozen. I was like, I know I'm not that.
You're
I'm
not
not
frozen,
Methuselah.
though.
I don't know. Okay. So we are also in Atlanta, Georgia, which, if you know, it's one of the parts of the country in the US with the highest population of African American people. And so our school also reflects that information. However, because Georgia State University is so committed to closing that gap and reducing the strain of attaining a college degree, we have graduation rates that are on par across all racial and socioeconomic standings, right? Because we do things like this course. Yeah.
And how long did you work on that for developing it?
Great question. So we spent an entire summer, summer of 2022 creating this, 2021 creating this. And we ran it for the first time in fall 2021. So we started in May 2021. By August, late August, we started it. But there was a lot of building the tracks as the train was coming. So we kept creating stuff as the modules or units were becoming due. But we were done by the end of the fall semester, so by December, because we had to be. We just edited the information as the students said, like, this link isn't working, or we don't understand what this person said in this video, so we looked for other videos to replace those and things of that nature. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks
Absolutely.
a lot.
Thanks for listening, you guys. I appreciate that.
And Laura, can I ask you something? Do you think that this kind of project is viable in the UK? Do you think that something on these kind of lines would be well
Yes.
received?
Yes, I think it would be. I think we're slowly moving that way a little bit. I think COVID kind of forced everyone to become a little bit more familiar with the functionalities of their virtual learning environments and things. And I think increasingly people are aware that this is a good way to go, and having resources which are asynchronous and engaging, not just a kind of a recorded lecture, is actually really valuable. So I think it could absolutely translate. Obviously, I think it's more common, I think, in the US that you have to buy the textbook and you have to have access to the online resources which go to that textbook, which doesn't necessarily, it's not the same thing here. But I think these learnings would translate well to other contexts, such as the UK.
Thanks. Sophie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was thinking that perhaps not at university level, but it's something that can almost be adopted at a national level in a way. And because we have been trying to think about ways to kind of get students more engaged, that's what Laura was actually doing, into economics. And of course, a lot of schools actually miss the resources in first place, means teachers and all these things. And so I wonder whether this is something perhaps that at a national level can be adopted for students to engage with economics and learn more about what economics is about. So kind of enthuse them to actually study economics. But great work, Amy and Laura, by the way.
I think thanks. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Steffi, because I think teachers are resource constrained more than I think the average person, and so anything that is there to make things easier is welcome. And particularly, if we're trying to encourage teachers, I strongly believe that if we want to encourage more people to study economics, we also need to kind of challenge the perception of economics among teachers, because they're kind of the primary influencer for our young people. We need to make it easier for teachers to engage with stuff and to think about passing that on to their students. So if they want to do CPD and these kind of things, which is a time-consuming activity, how do we make that easier and, give them tools to be able to, talk about economics with their students and offer it to their students? So definitely, I think teachers are the gatekeepers and we have to engage with them.
Amy, can I ask if this kind of projects are common in the US in different universities, or it's just because Steffi, well, she's always looking to the big picture and she's thinking very big. I'm more.
I support that.
Smaller.
I support that. It's great to think big. You start big, and wherever you land after that can never be a disappointment, right? But yes, we are finding that a lot of universities are asking their professors to create and or go open with their materials that they use. The reason why what we did here was different is because we didn't just curate materials from other places. We actually created assessments for our students, and we really took a step back to streamline the process, right? So we knew exactly what we wanted our students to learn. We knew exactly how we wanted to test them, and then created those. And then we went out to find whatever was available in Core, in OpenStax, in Lumen Learning, with videos as well, to then support those streamlined goals for our students. Yeah.
This is very, very interesting, I think, approach. Actually,
Yeah.
well, this is what we have been using for in our experience as well, that curating material and starting from the assessment is really, possibly the best starting point.
Yeah.
Is there any maybe final question or comments, of course? Let me see if I don't think I think we have yes, well, compliments are running in the chat. So
Steffi, can I just ask a general question for Laura and Amy, which is kind of where they see the direction of travel going in terms of, where we support students in the pipeline? Is it best to support them at the school point, prepare them early, or to do it when they're at uni, or do we need both?
I will say both. I mean, I know Laura spoke more to this. So our job in the uni, right, is to kind of continue what's being done prior to their entrance into the university, so they're not what tends to happen is they enter and they're extremely shocked, right? They're shell shocked by what they're experiencing, and that causes a lot of students to fall off from the program. But if they have been prepared coming in, right, then it's just we're continuing the progression. We're scaffolding to build them into being a great economist.
Yeah, no, I would totally echo what Amy said. I think that it has to start in school. I mean, that particularly, we know not everyone is going to progress to university at 18 or whenever, but I think there's a lot of work to be done about knowing that university education is there whenever, and if they decide to go later, they can still access to university. So I think it's about universities building communities with their schools and their teachers, and the universities are not just about teaching 18-year-olds in a particular subject and getting them into economics or whatever. Universities work with local businesses, they work with schools, they work with local charities, and I think if we really want our universities to be part of the community and to be able, we have to start with school, and then that's going to then help with the transition to university for those that do decide that they want to pursue a degree. So I think it does start in school, and it starts particularly with COVID. There's been a lot of learning loss, and students are trying to catch up, teachers are trying to catch the students up. So getting time in schools is more challenging than it would have been previously. So some of that transition learning has had to move to the first year of university. But I think ideally it should happen, before, and university should be part of the community, and supporting our young people regardless of which path they decide to go on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this was I think we are at the end of our session, thanks a lot, Laura and Amy, for sharing your experience and the learning you have done with your students or for your students. This was a really interesting session, and thanks a lot. And I hope we can meet in person or hosting you again at
absolutely
EconTEAching chat.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I had so much fun.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.